little elephant in the room that we have a $2 trillion budget deficit, $36 trillion in debt. We have a bond market that's negatively reacting to that lately. This is necessary. If we don't do this, we could face fiscal Armageddon at some point. No one's bringing that up. And by the way, aside from the typical MSNBC viewer, is the American people love this. You know, people, here's where journalism fell down on the job, Howie. We thought the old story about the $6,000 toilet seat in some battleship.
Well, I got to jump in. They may love it until they start to feel the effects of it, as we talked about earlier. And by the way, you mentioned MSNBC. I'm going to go to Molly next, Charlie. Hold on. Nicole Wallace on MSNBC, 3 minutes into Musk's appearance, broke in, started arguing, and they just talked over the segment for the rest of the time. Now, that was also true, that was true, I should say, at a Trump news conference. So, Molly, Elon Musk may be able to shrink the workforce. Private companies do this all the time, and we accept it. But aren't lawmakers and lobbyists and activists going to go nuclear if he starts cutting programs by 30 to 40%?
If he actually starts doing that. I mean, I think that's the real elephant in the room, is that for all the sort of drama and hubbub that it's created to have him sort of rampaging through, moving fast and breaking things in the federal government, it's not clear that he's actually making any big progress on that trillions in debt and deficits that we've been talking about.
Laying off a lot of people.
He's laying off less than 5% of the federal workforce so far, which is, and the federal workforce overall is a rounding error on that debt and deficits and the big picture of the federal government. So, you know, Republicans have the House and Senate. They've had them before. If they really did see billions or trillions of dollars that they could painlessly cut from the federal government, they should be doing that. I've asked them why they haven't done that so far, and they are sort of saying, well, it's great that Elon's doing it. But I think the question is, you know, whether they are actually going to get to the point where they're doing something meaningful versus just making a big spectacle.
Charlie, reporters asked Musk, we played one example of it repeatedly, about conflicts of interest, and he deflected by saying, I don't submit the contracts. Is that going to fly?
It shouldn't, and we should explore that. And by the way, he's actually cutting, if he's exposing government waste and we're wasting it on SpaceX, well, the hammer might come down on SpaceX. People haven't thought about that aspect of this either. But I want to get back to my initial point. Reporters like me and Molly fell down on the job. We didn't see the big story that was out there with all this government spending on stuff that the public hates. This is the biggest story right now, because Elon Musk is out there saying, we give money to some of the most bizarre things, and it's your money, the taxpayer, and people are outraged. Now, obviously, if we start cutting, like, you know, stuff in rural Georgia, people might get mad. But overall, I don't see, like, riots in the street over, like, you know, thousands of dollars going to transgender dance festivals in Bangladesh. I just don't see that. Maybe you guys can tell me.
Well, first of all, I think that Elon Musk, I just want to point this out, gets relentlessly negative coverage because most of the press thinks he ruined Twitter and spews things that aren't true. But Molly, on this point, is it fair to say that we haven't covered, that we haven't covered waste, fraud, and abuse? It seems to come up in every campaign in the last 40 years.
And I think we cover the big picture of the debt and the deficit, especially at the Wall Street Journal, on a very consistent and very rigorous basis. But the truth about the debt and the deficit is that you can find, you know, every bit of something that could plausibly be considered waste, fraud, and abuse, and you're not going to make progress on the trillions in federal debt until you actually cut the things that I think people would not be so pleased to, that will not be cheering in the streets to see being cut, like Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security and defense spending. And so when and if they get into the point where they are actually starting to make meaningful cuts to the federal budget, it'll be interesting to see what the response is.
Gotta go, those are the big ones. But this is not like laying off software engineers at Tesla or SpaceX. Charlie, hang on. After the break, the White House bans the AP and Anderson Cooper's on-air apology.
in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that.
Molly, does the AP's decision to stick with Gulf of Mexico justify the White House barring its reporters, not just from pooled events, not just from Air Force One, but...
Shame on AP. Shame on them.
I think it's a really troubling precedent that's being set here. I mean, the wire services job, as the press secretary said, is to tell the truth. And the truth is that the U.S. government has changed the name for the purposes of the U.S. government, but it does not have the authority to change the name by which international waters are referred
for the rest of the world.
For the rest of the world,
Right.
and the rest of the world has not agreed to that change. So, you know, they did change the name of Mount McKinley, formerly Denali, because the U.S. government does have the power to make that change. So there's no animus on the part of the AP against the administration. They're just following their style and attempting to communicate the truth to their readers as best they can. And so I don't think we want to get to a point where the administration is enforcing its version of reality by kicking out anybody, that sees the truth differently but is not lying.
Executive Editor Julie Pace says this violates the First Amendment. It's alarming. Charlie, the AP does say, well, this is what the administration calls the Gulf. Do you find this kind of petty?
It's petty, but it doesn't violate the First Amendment. Let's face it, the AP can cover the Trump administration without going to a single press conference. They can cover the Trump administration without being in the briefing room. You cover it through sources and through enterprise reporting. It's not managed news. And much of this stuff is literally managed news, and it's process reporting. It's the same type of process reporting about the budget cuts. $2 trillion, we write about it, no one cares. Elon comes and puts some flesh on the bone, put some meat out there.
Yeah.
That, okay, it's brilliant, but guess what? It goes to transgender dance festivals in Bangladesh, and then people get outraged. And so I think the AP should use this as a opportunity to do real investigative enterprise reporting. And by the way, who cares what Pam Bondi says? It doesn't educate readers what she's saying or viewers.
All right.
I mean,
well, I think you make a fair point about other kinds of reporting. At the same time, this may well be a warning shot to the press. I want to turn now to Anderson Cooper. He was on the air with former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu when he kind of let loose with an insult.
So would you stop that? Would you stop that process?
Don't be the portrayal. What I'm saying is the portrayal by him is just not factually accurate. Before we go, I want to apologize. I was mean. I was rude to you, and I never.
Are you kidding? I grew up with 7 brothers and sisters.
The word that was bleep is sort of a shorthand nickname for Richard. And Molly, I'm glad Anderson apologized, but it was kind of an embarrassing moment.
A little bit. I mean, I think, as the governor said, like, no one was too bothered by it in the moment. It's part of a heated back and forth, and frankly brought a little bit of authenticity to the discussion, I think. Like, obviously it's inappropriate, and no one should do that in a live interview. But I think the governor was right to take it in stride in the way that he did.
You bleeping liked it. Charlie, this is not about Anderson, but I'm noticing that there's a new trend in cable news. At least on some channels, where cursing is cool, dropping F-bombs is cool. There's a Democratic congresswoman, who just aimed the F-bomb at Trump. And, maybe I'm like ridiculously old-fashioned, but I think it shows a lack of class.
Yeah, but sometimes we slip. Trust me, as someone who was an ink stained Grinch for many years and then went on TV, the sparks fly and you slip. And Anderson's a nice guy. I know him for years.
He's a very nice guy.
Yeah, but we slip sometimes. This is live TV, and it's in the moment, and we're trying to be spontaneous. And sometimes you make a mistake. Trust me, I've been called worse on cable TV. I will say this, though, that if you sort of overtly go out there to do this, and if that is a sort of way to get eyeballs, I mean, then I agree with you 100% that, we're defining deviancy down. This was not a case of that, though.
No, I don't think so at all. But at the broader point, and of course I think if it's aimed at Donald Trump, a lot of people say, yeah, but again, it just adds an element of crudity. Thank you so much. Charlie Gasparino still to come. A president who talks to reporters and talks and talks and talks.